Put your hands where I can see them. Marcus Hale froze, the half-eaten sandwich slipping from his fingers. It landed on the park bench beside him, forgotten. He turned slowly, confusion tightening in his chest as 3 officers rushed toward him with weapons drawn. In broad daylight, in front of families and joggers and a food truck line. "What the hell?" he muttered, lifting his hands. "On your knees. Now." One of them barked. Marcus complied instantly, lowering himself onto the concrete walkway in his tailored slacks, palms up in surrender. He didn't run, didn't argue, didn't even ask why, because he knew how this worked. He'd given diversity lectures to police cadets. He told his men, "Stay calm, stay alive." Now he was living his own advice. A crowd began forming, phones out, recording. "You're under arrest for assault and robbery," an officer said, snapping cold cuffs around Marcus's wrists. "Assault?" Marcus blinked. "Wait, what? You've got the wrong guy. You think we just picked your name out of a hat?" The officer sneered. "You match the description. Tall, black, wearing a suit. Pretty specific." "That's half the lawyers in the city," Marcus replied, trying not to raise his voice. "I work 3 blocks from here." But they weren't listening. One officer yanked him up so hard his shoulder popped. Someone in the crowd shouted, "He didn't do anything." Another, "That's Marcus Hale. He helps with the youth program." It didn't matter. They shoved him into the back of the squad car without another word. The precinct reeked of sweat, floor polish, and something sour Marcus didn't want to identify. The officers booked him with mechanical indifference, ignoring his calm pleas to call his lawyer. He tried to give them attorney Lisa Boyd's number 3 times. Each time they waved him off. "You get your 1 call after processing," said the desk sergeant, not looking up from his screen. "You know this is a mistake," Marcus said, voice steady. "I've never even been arrested." The sergeant snorted. "There's a first time for everything." They took his fingerprints, photographed him, and threw him in a holding cell with 2 others, both men of color. One was muttering to himself. The other had his head down, silent. Marcus sat down on the bench, stunned. Across town, Judge Raymond Knox was finishing a long lunch at his private club. He wiped steak juice from his chin, then leaned back, satisfied. He liked these midday escapes, no robes, no rules, no pretending. His phone buzzed. "Ray," said his friend on the line. "Got something for you. Assault and robbery suspect just picked up. Black guy in a suit, smooth-talking type. Thought it might be your kind of case." Knox chuckled. "They always are. I'll take it. Put him on my calendar." He ended the call and finished the last of his bourbon. Hours later, Marcus finally saw a clock. 6:17 p.m. He'd been sitting in the same spot for over 4 hours. Finally, an officer opened the cell door. "You've got arraignment first thing in the morning." "Wait, what about my phone call?" The officer shrugged. "Too late now. Courts are closed. You'll talk to your lawyer tomorrow, if you've got one." The next morning, Marcus stood in courtroom 4B wearing the same clothes from the day before, wrinkled and stale. His tie had been confiscated for safety. He scanned the room. No sign of Lisa, his lawyer. No family. Just the prosecutor, a court reporter, and a bailiff leaning on the wall like it was his living room. Then the door opened, and Judge Knox entered. Tall, white, mid-60s, Knox had the kind of face that looked carved out of stone. Permanent frown lines, eyes like gunmetal. He adjusted his robe like a king settling into his throne. Marcus felt a chill crawl down his back. The clerk read the charges. Marcus Hale, age 31, charged with felony assault and robbery of a white male in Midtown. Victim identified the suspect by clothing and build. Bail hearing set for today. Your Honor, Marcus said carefully. My attorney wasn't notified. I asked multiple times to make a phone call. Silence, Knox snapped, not even glancing at him. You'll speak when spoken to. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he nodded. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the state recommends no bail. The defendant has no criminal record, but due to the violent nature of the crime and the suspect's ability to flee, he has access to a passport and international contacts. We request remand. That's a lie, Marcus said, before he could stop himself. I've never even left the country. Strike that, Knox said. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Marcus blinked. Contempt? This wasn't justice. This wasn't procedure. This was a setup. Knox scribbled something on a notepad, then looked up. Bail is denied. Trial date will be set in the coming week. But Your Honor, Marcus tried again. There's been no evidence, no review. You're welcome to appeal, Knox said, already rising. But let me give you some advice, Mr. Hale. Don't mistake that suit for credibility in this courtroom. Your kind wear all kinds of disguises. Gasps rippled through the back of the courtroom. The bailiff's smirk widened. Marcus stood frozen, heat boiling in his chest. Not just anger. Realization. This wasn't about evidence. It wasn't about justice. It was about him. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters buzzed around, sniffing for headlines. None of them took much notice of Marcus's case. Just another man of color denied bail. Hardly news. But someone was watching. A silver sedan idled down the block. Behind tinted windows, a woman in a navy blue suit held a tablet showing Marcus's mugshot. Her eyes narrowed. She knew that face, and she wasn't about to let it disappear. Courtroom tension and biased proceedings. By the time Marcus stepped back into the courtroom 5 days later, he'd spent over 120 hours in a cold, overcrowded holding facility. His sleep was broken by shouting, his meals came in plastic trays, and the only thing keeping him sane was the thought of his lawyer showing up and setting things right. She didn't. Public defender's late, the bailiff muttered with a shrug as Marcus stood behind the defense table. His eyes scanned the courtroom, no Lisa Boyd, no familiar face. Just Judge Knox looming behind the bench, tapping his pen with impatience. Marcus leaned toward the bailiff. Can I ask for a short delay until my lawyer? She's already been reassigned, Knox interrupted sharply, hearing him. You'll proceed with the public defender today. But, Your Honor, Knox held up a finger. Are you suggesting the court-appointed attorney is inadequate? I'm saying I don't even know who they are. I haven't spoken to anyone. A young woman in wrinkled clothes burst through the doors, breathless, papers spilling from her arms. Sorry, I'm here. She glanced at Marcus. Emily Drexler, public defender. Knox sighed dramatically. Let's move it along. Mr. Hale's wasting enough of the court's time. The trial hadn't even started, and the tone was set. Emily tried her best. She really did. But the case had been dumped on her last minute with barely enough time to skim the file. The prosecutor, on the other hand, came prepared with a smug grin and an overconfident witness. The alleged victim, a middle-aged man named Barry Whitaker, took the stand. He claimed Marcus approached him near a bank, asked for directions, and then sucker-punched him and stole his wallet. Did you get a good look at the attacker? The prosecutor asked. Oh, yeah. I'll never forget that face. Tall black guy, nice clothes, but angry. Real angry. Is the attacker in this courtroom? Barry pointed. Right there. That's him. Marcus didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. When Emily cross-examined, cracks immediately appeared. You said the attacker had a tattoo on his hand. My client has none. You also described dreadlocks. Mr. Hale clearly has close-cropped hair. Barry shifted in his seat. Maybe it was someone else, but I'm pretty sure it was him. Pretty sure. Emily raised her eyebrows. Judge Knox cut in. Let's not badger the witness, Miss Drexler. Continue.
Then came the surveillance footage, or what was supposed to be. Emily stood. Your Honor, we have requested CCTV footage from the ATM camera at the scene. It should show the actual incident. The prosecutor casually flipped through his notes. Unfortunately, that footage was corrupted. Camera malfunction. No video available. Marcus blinked. That's not possible. I passed in front of that ATM 20 minutes before the supposed incident. It records everything. You weren't asked to speak, Knox snapped. Emily tried to push back. We'd like to request a full forensic review of the footage file. There may still be. Denied, Knox said without pause. This court is not in the business of chasing hypothetical evidence. Emily turned to Marcus, whispering, I'll file a formal request later. Don't worry. But he could see it in her eyes. She was being steamrolled, and she knew it. The next blow came when they tried to bring in a witness, an older man named Mr. Alvarez, who ran a shoe repair shop across from the park. He had seen Marcus sitting alone, eating lunch when the police swarmed him. But as Alvarez sat down and introduced himself in broken English, the prosecutor objected. Witness does not speak fluent English. We have no certified translator present. Emily protested. He understands enough. I can ask simple questions. Knox nodded toward Alvarez. Do you understand the oath you just took? Alvarez hesitated, nodding slowly. Do you swear to tell the truth? Yes, Alvarez said. The prosecutor pounced. Objection. He doesn't understand the gravity of the oath. Sustained, Knox said. Strike the testimony. Emily looked stunned. Your Honor, he can Do not argue with me, Miss Drexler. Alvarez was dismissed, visibly confused. Marcus buried his face in his hands. At lunch recess, Emily sat beside Marcus in the defendant's box. This isn't normal, she whispered. This is bad. I've never seen a judge deny this many basic motions. Marcus didn't respond. He stared ahead like he was watching himself from somewhere far away. You said you're a mentor? She asked, trying to focus him. I run an education nonprofit, he said quietly. For inner-city teens. Most of them have seen more prison than school. I try to change that. Emily looked away, swallowing hard. God, this is insane. That afternoon, Judge Knox seemed even less interested in decorum. He overruled every single defense objection. He even cut off closing arguments halfway through, citing time constraints. The jury was given instructions and sent off. Within hours, they returned with a verdict. Guilty, the foreperson said, almost apologetically. Marcus felt his knees weaken. He didn't look at Emily. Didn't look at the prosecutor. Just stared straight ahead at Knox, whose face remained unreadable. As the clerk read the charges aloud again, Marcus whispered under his breath, this wasn't a trial. It was theater. Later that evening, as Judge Knox left the courthouse, a colleague caught up with him in the parking lot. Hey, Ray. Heard you pushed that Hale case through in record time. Knox smirked, tossing his briefcase into the trunk. Guy thought a degree and a tie could fool me. You sure he was guilty? Knox snorted. Please. They're all guilty of something. The colleague didn't reply, just nodded uneasily. Knox got in his car and drove off. Confident, smug, untouchable. But someone was watching him. Again. From the same sedan as before, the woman in the navy blue suit tapped her phone and whispered, He's gone too far this time. Run a full background on Marcus Hale. I want everything. Now. Section 3. The sentencing. The courtroom was half full, unusually quiet, but the weight in the air was unbearable. Marcus Hale stood next to Emily Drexler, stiff and worn, his suit hanging a little looser after nearly a month in holding. His family was seated in the third row, his mother clutching tissues, his sister blinking back tears, and his mentor from the nonprofit seated beside them, silent but present. Judge Knox stepped onto the bench like a man stepping onto a stage. He glanced at the clock, shuffled a few papers, and cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on charges of aggravated assault and robbery. Marcus didn't flinch. Emily had filed every motion she could. Appeals for mistrial. Objections to the dismissal of key evidence. A request to delay sentencing for review. All denied. Now it was just this. Knox folded his hands. Before I issue sentencing, does the defendant have anything to say? Marcus looked at the judge. Then at the jury box, now empty. Then out toward the people he loved. His mother, who raised him alone. His sister, who used to call him Superman. He stepped forward. I've worked my whole life to make something of myself, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. I grew up 2 blocks from where this courtroom stands. I buried friends from gun violence. I saw classmates disappear into the system at 15. He paused, letting the silence hang. I chose a different path. College. Law school. I created a program to help kids who didn't get those chances. I've spoken at community events, worked with police departments, mentored students, some of whom went on to become attorneys themselves. He turned toward Knox. I believed in the law. I believed in this system. But you, he caught himself, then said more carefully, you've used your power to turn this courtroom into a weapon. Someone in the audience sniffed. Another whispered, tell it. I am not guilty, and I forgive the people who lied, who were wrong, even the jury that didn't see the truth. But I will not pretend this was justice. He stepped back. Still tall. Still dignified. Even in chains. Knox slowly removed his reading glasses like a man preparing to deliver wisdom. That was quite the speech, he said, voice thick with sarcasm. But rhetoric doesn't erase facts. The law does not bend for eloquence or resume. He picked up a printed sheet, the pre-written sentence. You present yourself as a polished, educated man. But I've lived long enough to know a polished surface often hides rot. You, Mr. Hale, are no exception. Knox paused for dramatic effect, then delivered the blow. You are hereby sentenced to 22 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for the first 12. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Marcus's mother cried out, dropping her tissues. His sister collapsed into sobs. Even Emily choked on her breath. May this serve as a message, Knox said, that we do not tolerate wolves in sheep's clothing in the city. Marcus blinked once, twice, but said nothing. He let the bailiff cuff him calmly as if he were already elsewhere. As he was led out, reporters swarmed the hallway. A few had picked up the case after the trial, especially once the footage of his arrest surfaced online. Another high-profile injustice? One blogger called it. Emily pushed through them, shaken. He was railroaded, she muttered to a camera. This was never about guilt. It was about bias. But her voice was drowned by others, louder, shouting over each other. Marcus was ushered into a van that would take him to processing. He sat in the back, staring out the window. The city he loved blurred past. The schools he'd spoken at. The churches he'd volunteered in. Gone. That evening, a quiet meeting took place in a private office on the 15th floor of the Federal Judiciary Building. Chief Justice Helena Carter watched the video of the sentencing with tight lips and folded arms. Around her, a small team of legal analysts, investigators, and advisors waited for her response. She didn't speak at first. She watched the part where Marcus delivered his speech. Watched the way he looked the judge in the eye. Watched the cruelty in Knox's sentencing. Watched the tears of the family. Then she finally spoke. I know him. The room froze. He mentored my son. Years ago. Pulled him off the edge when no one else could. She looked down. We owe that man more than we can ever repay. One of the advisors spoke carefully. Ma'am, are you sure it's him? I'm sure, Carter said. I want Knox's case history on my desk by tomorrow morning. I want every decision he's made in the past 10 years, every biased ruling, every overruled appeal, every suspicious dismissal. She stood, already dialing her phone. And find out what happened to that security footage. Back in his holding cell, Marcus lay awake. The lights never turned off. The bed was metal. His bunkmate snored. But Marcus wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about everything he'd built and how one man had taken it all with the swing of a gavel. He closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in quiet focus. Because something in his gut told him. This wasn't over. Not yet. Section 4, the connections begin to unravel. Chief Justice Helena Carter didn't waste time. By 9 a.m. the next morning, a confidential task force was already combing through Judge Knox's docket history. At first glance, nothing screamed corruption, but Helena didn't need screaming. She needed patterns. And patterns they found. Knox had a history of issuing maximum sentences, particularly to black male defendants, many of whom had weak evidence against them or questionable arrests. Worse, in multiple cases, key exculpatory evidence had mysteriously gone missing or been ruled inadmissible. She tapped her pen as she read through the list. He's been doing this for years, she muttered. Her aide, Andre, nodded. He's careful. Always uses technicalities to justify it. But when you line them up like this, it becomes a strategy, she finished grimly. Not justice. Meanwhile, Emily Drexler couldn't let it go. She knew she'd lost. She knew the odds were slim. But something about Marcus Hale's case gnawed at her. It wasn't just a bad ruling, it felt rigged. She filed a formal appeal anyway, citing judicial misconduct. It would likely be denied, but she had to try. Then she got a call. Ms. Drexler? My name is Andre. I work with Chief Justice Carter. We'd like to speak with you. Privately. Emily froze. Wait, the Chief Justice? She's taking an interest in the Hale case. Are you free to meet today? That afternoon, Emily sat across from Helena Carter in a secure conference room. She looked every bit the part, composed, elegant, and dangerous in the right way. You did everything you could, Carter said calmly. The problem was never your defense. It was the bench. Emily leaned in. I had no idea you were watching this case. I wasn't, Carter admitted, until I saw his name. Marcus Hale. You know him. He mentored my son 5 years ago. Pulled him out of a very dark place. Her eyes darkened. My son's in law school now. Because of Marcus. Emily sat back, stunned. We're going to fix this, Carter said. But it has to be airtight. We'll need more than sympathy. We need proof that Judge Knox deliberately violated the law. Emily nodded. I'm in. Whatever you need. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in a concrete cell 3 hours away, still waiting to be processed into the general population. Rumors spread quickly inside prison walls, and news of his high-profile sentencing had already reached the inmates. Some were skeptical, another sued who thought he was better than us. Others respected him. One even whispered through the bars, they did you dirty, man. Whole city talkin'. Marcus barely responded. He kept to himself, quiet but watching everything. Listening. Calculating. He knew the system. He had studied it. Taught others how to survive it. Now he was living it. But he also knew one thing, the law might bend, but when it breaks, it leaves a paper trail. Back in the city, Chief Justice Carter's team tracked down Barry Whitaker, the so-called victim. He had a record. Nothing major, but suspicious, multiple dropped charges, sealed documents, and a series of minor fraud offenses. Enough to raise questions. Then came the break. A retired court clerk came forward, an older woman named Denise. She reached out anonymously, asking to speak off record. I saw things, she told Carter's investigator. We used to joke about how Knox streamlined justice. But after a while, it wasn't funny anymore. Can you be specific? There were files that disappeared. Motions that never got entered. Sometimes evidence would vanish between filing and court. Always in certain types of cases. The investigator leaned forward. Was Marcus Hale's case one of them? She hesitated, then nodded. I remember his file. We logged surveillance footage from the ATM, it was there. I saw the entry myself. But it never made it to court? Denise shook her head. Gone. Just like that. Emily, now fully looped in, reached out to the local precinct. She filed an official subpoena for the ATM footage log, metadata, backups, anything. 2 days later, an IT officer responded quietly. I can't send you footage, he said over the phone, but there's a gap in the logs the day of the arrest. Someone manually deleted files. Who? Emily pressed. There was a pause. Then, Judge's office had access. That's all I'll say. Carter's team now had enough to quietly open an inquiry. She called the Director of Judicial Oversight directly. Discrepancies in evidence handling. Pattern of maximum sentencing targeting a racial demographic. Personal misconduct. It's enough to warrant investigation. The director hesitated. He's a sitting judge with 30 years on the bench. I'm the Chief Justice, Carter said. He answers to me. The first sign of trouble came to Knox in the form of a letter. Simple, formal, stamped with the seal of the judiciary. You are hereby notified that a formal inquiry has been opened regarding your conduct in State versus Marcus Hale. Knox's eyes narrowed as he read. He wasn't panicked. Yet. But for the first time in years, he felt it. A crack. Meanwhile, Marcus received a short, unexpected visit from a prison staffer. Your public defender dropped this off, the man said, sliding a folder under his door. Inside, a printed email from Emily. Marcus, there's movement. The Chief Justice is involved. She knows who you are. Don't give up. This isn't over. For the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself a breath. Not a sigh of relief. A breath of preparation. Because justice wasn't coming gently. It was coming with teeth. Judge Knox stood before his mirror, straightening his tie. He looked as sharp as ever, immaculate suit, polished shoes, the smug air of a man untouchable. But something about the courthouse felt different that morning. Colder. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. He brushed it off. Until his clerk, Danny, handed him a sealed envelope. Sir. From Judicial Oversight. Knox took it, slit the seal open without a word, and scanned the document. Notice of Ethics Investigation. Allegations, evidence tampering, judicial bias, unlawful sentencing patterns. Requested, immediate cooperation. Knox's hands didn't shake, but he read the letter twice. Someone was coming for him. And they weren't bluffing. At the state courthouse, Chief Justice Carter's task force launched a formal probe. Publicly, they called it a routine internal review. Behind closed doors, it was anything but. They compiled interviews, transcripts, and flagged every questionable ruling Knox had made. Names piled up. Young men, mostly black or Latino, many with first offenses, many sentenced beyond reasonable bounds. Then came the real bombshell, surveillance footage logs. Emily and the IT specialist traced deletion records on the exact date of Marcus Hale's arrest. The footage, key evidence proving Marcus wasn't near the scene of the alleged robbery, had been accessed using a login from a secured judicial terminal. The digital fingerprint matched Judge Knox's personal assistant acting under verbal instruction. "This is it," Emily whispered. He buried the footage. Andre from Carter's team leaned over the laptop. "We're about to bury him." 3 days later, the story broke. The New York Herald published the headline. Did a state judge bury evidence to sentence a rising black lawyer? New footage disappears in controversial case. It spread like wildfire. Talk shows, podcasts, legal forums, all ablaze with theories, outrage, and cold facts. The public learned about Marcus Hale, the youth mentor, the Harvard-educated legal advocate, the man sentenced to 22 years for a crime he likely never committed. And they learned about Knox. A clip from a 2018 interview resurfaced, Knox saying, "Some people are just wired for crime, no matter the degrees they hang on the wall." Now it was clear who he meant. Inside the prison, Marcus watched the news on a fuzzy TV in the corner of the rec room. The headline crawled across the screen, breaking, "Hale case under judicial review." Inmates turned toward him. One grinned. "Damn. You really about to take down a judge?" Marcus gave a small nod but said nothing. Inside, his heart pounded. Not with joy, but justice long delayed. Knox, meanwhile, was unraveling. He barked at reporters in the parking lot, no comment. He snapped at staffers, "Tell them to stay out of my chambers." He called in favors, but the phone rang longer now before people picked up. Some didn't return his calls at all. Then the final blow came. A court order signed by Chief Justice Carter herself. Effective immediately, Judge Thomas W. Knox is suspended from the bench pending outcome of investigation. Knox stood in his chambers when he read it. He'd spent 30 years issuing sentences. Today he received one of his own. Carter held a press conference. She stood behind the podium, firm but composed, with Emily beside her. "We are committed to a judiciary that is fair, transparent, and accountable. The allegations against Judge Knox are serious, and we are pursuing them with the full weight of this office." A reporter asked, "What about Marcus Hale?" Carter's answer was swift, "He will not be forgotten. And if we confirm he was wrongfully convicted, I promise you he will walk out of that prison." Another hand shot up. "Why this case? Why now?" Carter looked into the crowd. "Because justice delayed is still justice. And because Marcus Hale once helped my son when no one else would. Now it's time we help him." Emily visited Marcus 2 days later. He sat across the glass, wearing his orange jumpsuit, eyes sharper than ever. "They're coming for him, Marcus," she said. "Everything's moving." He nodded once. "I saw it on the news." She hesitated, then added, "Carter wants to meet you." "She's coming in person." Marcus looked up, surprised. "Why?" Emily smiled. "Because you're not just some guy she's helping. You're the man who changed her son's life." She never forgot. For a moment, Marcus didn't speak. Then he leaned closer to the glass. "Neither did I." Started with whispers in the halls of the courthouse. Then came the emails, judges quietly distancing themselves. Old friends who once dined with Knox didn't return his calls. Law firms that had bragged about their ties to his courtroom scrubbed his name off their websites. Knox was toxic now. He sat alone in his study, lights dim, TV on mute. News channels replayed the same footage, the Hale case, the footage tampering, the interview with Denise, the retired clerk who now spoke publicly about the vanishing evidence. They called it one of the biggest judicial scandals in decades. Knox poured a drink, hand shaking slightly as his face appeared on screen with the words, "Investigated for racial bias and judicial corruption." He muted it before they played the clip again, the one where he smirks and says, "You can put a tie on a criminal, doesn't make him less dangerous." Now the world heard it for what it really was. In her office, Chief Justice Carter reviewed a newly compiled 63-page report, Misconduct Summary, Judge Thomas W. Knox. It outlined years of abusive sentencing patterns, statistical disparities, and manipulation of case files. But it was Marcus's case that blew it wide open. "This is airtight," Andre said. "They can't ignore this anymore." Carter nodded. "File it. Recommend disbarment." Andre blinked. Disbarment. Let the system eat him the way he fed it innocent men for 30 years. Knox was summoned to a closed-door disciplinary hearing. He arrived alone, dressed like he still believed the title judge would protect him. Inside, the room was filled with legal veterans, people who once respected him. Now, they reviewed him like a case file. The head of the panel spoke without ceremony. "Judge Knox, your rulings show a persistent bias against defendants of color, particularly young black men. Care to explain?" Knox scoffed. "This is politics. You're making a scapegoat out of me because of one loud case." Carter, seated on the panel, leaned in. "No, we're exposing a pattern that's finally come to light. And your time manipulating justice is over." Knox opened his mouth to protest, but this time no one was listening. The panel voted 6-0. Suspension upheld. Recommendation for permanent removal and full disbarment. The news hit harder than anyone expected. Judge Knox disbarred after racism allegations confirmed. Chief Justice Carter leads cleanup of broken bench. Marcus Hale case reopened, potential overturn in days. Knox's house was swarmed by reporters. He stayed inside, shades drawn, door locked. His wife had left weeks ago. His name was already being stripped off plaques, awards, courthouse halls. One by one, his legacies vanished. Meanwhile, in a modest meeting room inside the prison, Marcus Hale sat across from Chief Justice Carter for the first time in nearly 6 years. She walked in, poised, calm, but when she saw him, something cracked. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I've been waiting a long time to do this." He nodded, studying her. "I remember you. From your son's graduation." She smiled. "You changed his life. Now it's my turn to help change yours." She slid a document across the table. "We've reopened your case. We have proof that your trial was tainted. The footage was deleted, the witness was coached, the judge was dirty." Marcus stared at it for a long moment. Carter leaned forward. "We're filing for immediate exoneration. You'll be out within days." Still, Marcus didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was low. "I don't want just freedom." Carter's eyebrows raised. "What do you want?" "I want this system to remember what it did. I want real change. Not just for me, for the next kid who walks into court thinking justice is real." Carter smiled again, this time with pride. "You're still fighting," she said. "That's why you're going to win." That night, as Marcus was led back to his cell, the guard didn't say much, just nodded with quiet respect. He wasn't just another inmate anymore. He was the man who brought down a racist judge. The man who'd survived the system and was about to walk out of it. It happened quietly. No media circus. No grand ceremony. Just a signature on a court document, a final review by the appellate board, and a stamped order. The conviction of Marcus Hale is hereby vacated. All charges dismissed. 312 days behind bars, stripped of everything he'd worked for, undone in seconds. A guard approached his cell with a rare, respectful tone. "You're going home." The gates opened just after sunrise. Marcus stepped out in a simple gray hoodie, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the crisp morning air hitting his face like a new beginning. Waiting just beyond the barriers, Emily Drexler, standing beside Chief Justice Carter, and a handful of reporters who had gotten wind of the release. No flashing lights. Just wide, stunned eyes. Marcus didn't smile. He nodded to Carter. "Thank you." She stepped forward, shaking his hand with quiet intensity. "I'm sorry it took this long." "Long enough," he said, "but not forever." The media didn't waste time. Marcus Hale walks free after wrongful conviction, corrupt judge disbarred. System failed, but he fought back. Marcus Hale's story of injustice and resolve. The public reaction was a storm, outrage toward Knox, sympathy toward Marcus, and a wave of calls for reform. Protests reignited outside courthouses, demanding oversight on judicial appointments. And through it all, Marcus stayed quiet. Until the interview. He sat across from a journalist in a calm, dim-lit studio, dressed sharp in a navy suit, a small bracelet on his wrist, the same one he wore in prison. "When they sentenced you," the reporter asked, "did you think this day would come?" Marcus looked straight into the camera. "No. But I prepared for it anyway. What do you want people to remember about this case?" He paused. That justice doesn't begin and end in a courtroom. It begins with accountability. And sometimes it takes hell to find it. The interviewer leaned in. "And Judge Knox?" Marcus didn't blink. "He's not the story. The system that let him thrive is." Knox never spoke publicly again. After being disbarred, he moved out of state. Rumors swirled. He tried to file for reinstatement and was laughed out of the process. His name became a cautionary tale, his legacy stained, shattered, forgotten. Meanwhile, Marcus began to rebuild. He didn't return to his old firm. Instead, he opened a legal clinic downtown, the Hale Center for Justice, offering pro bono defense and education for at-risk youth. His first client? A 17-year-old boy caught in a robbery case, arrested by the same precinct that once framed Marcus. The boy walked free 2 months later. 1 year passed. Marcus stood on the steps of the courthouse, this time by choice, with a microphone in his hand and a crowd below him. He looked out across the sea of young faces, many holding signs, some even wearing shirts with his face. He spoke slowly, deliberately. I was broken by a man who wore the robe of justice. But I wasn't destroyed. And that's what we need to teach every person walking into court, afraid of who's behind the bench. You are not powerless. He raised his voice just slightly. We don't just need good lawyers. We need better judges. And we'll get them. The crowd erupted. But Marcus stayed still, eyes focused, voice steady. Because his fight was never about revenge. It was about legacy. And now he had one.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like.